What if I told you the secret to becoming irresistible to women isn't found in pickup lines or flashy tricks, but in the ancient wisdom of Stoicism? Think about that for a moment. This philosophy, practiced by Roman emperors and warriors, isn't just about enduring hardship, it's about mastering yourself so completely that attraction becomes effortless. Picture this: you're at a social event completely at ease, not scrambling for approval or validation. You're present, grounded, and unshakably confident. And here's the surprising truth: women notice that energy. They're drawn to it because Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about channeling it into a quiet strength that speaks louder than any words. Now, let's be honest, modern dating can feel like a minefield. One study found that nearly 70% of men report feeling anxious or insecure when approaching someone they're attracted to. But what if the problem isn't what you're doing wrong? What if it's what you're missing? Stoicism teaches us that true power comes from within, from a mindset that doesn't crumble under rejection or feast on fleeting validation. Imagine carrying yourself with the calm assurance of a man who knows his worth isn't determined by anyone else's opinion. That's the kind of man who doesn't just attract women, he captivates them. This isn't about manipulation or playing games. It's about embodying principles that have stood the test of time, principles that transform how you think, act, and carry yourself in every interaction. Over the next 20 minutes, we're diving deep into the 20 Stoic principles that will reshape your approach to dating. You'll discover how to cultivate unshakable confidence, how to communicate with purposeful clarity, and most importantly, how to become the kind of man who doesn't just chase attraction but commands it. This is more than a video, it's a blueprint, and by the end, you won't just understand why Stoicism makes you magnetic, you'll feel it. So let's begin. The first principle is mastering your emotions, not by hiding them, but by understanding them so deeply that they no longer control you. Think about the last time you saw a man lose his cool over something small. Maybe he got ignored at the bar or took a rejection personally. Now compare that to the man who stays composed, who doesn't flinch when things don't go his way. Which one commands respect? Which one draws people in? That's the power of apatheia, the Stoic concept of emotional clarity. It's not about being emotionless, it's about not being enslaved by every passing feeling. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, wrote in his journals that the key to strength is recognizing that external events don't disturb us, it's our judgments about them that do. When you internalize that, something shifts. A woman cancels a date. Instead of spiraling into self-doubt, you shrug and recalibrate. Someone tests your patience. You don't rise to the bait, you respond with amused detachment. That's the kind of emotional mastery that makes you magnetic. Here's why it works. Women, like all people, are wired to seek stability. They can sense neediness or insecurity from a mile away. It's in the tone of your voice, the way you lean in too much, the way a single text left on read ruins your day. But when you've trained yourself to process emotions without reacting impulsively, you project a rare kind of confidence. It's not arrogance, it's the quiet assurance of a man who knows his worth isn't up for debate. Imagine two men at a party. One laughs too loudly at every joke, desperate for validation. The other listens intently, smiles when he's genuinely amused, and isn't fazed by silences. Who do you think leaves the deeper impression? This isn't about being cold or robotic. Stoicism teaches emotional intelligence, the ability to observe your feelings without letting them hijack your actions. When you master that, you stop seeking approval because you no longer need it. And ironically, that's when approval finds you. The women you meet will notice the difference. They'll sense the man who isn't rattled by petty drama, the one who doesn't chase but attracts, because true confidence isn't loud, it's the unshakable calm of a man who's mastered himself. And that's irresistible. So how do you actually put this emotional mastery into practice? It starts with small, daily exercises that train your mind to stay steady no matter what happens. One of the most powerful is negative visualization, a Stoic technique where you deliberately imagine losing what you value. Sounds intense, that's the point. Picture this: you mentally rehearse your crush walking away, your date canceling last minute, or even facing public embarrassment. Not to dwell on fear, but to disarm it. When you've already faced the worst-case scenario in your mind, real-life setbacks lose their sting. And here's what women notice: the guy who doesn't tense up when plans change, who stays playful even when things go sideways. That's the kind of unshakable presence that draws them in. Then there's journaling, not just venting emotions, but dissecting them like a Stoic surgeon. Every evening, take 5 minutes to write down moments where your feelings hijacked your actions. Did you panic when she didn't text back? Did your confidence waver when a taller guy walked into the room? Trace those reactions back to their roots. Marcus Aurelius did this daily, asking himself, what disturbed my peace today, and was it within my control? Over time, you'll spot patterns, triggers that once threw you off now become opportunities to exercise calm. Women sense this self-awareness instantly. They're surrounded by men who blame the world for their moods. The man who owns his emotions stands out. But here's the game changer: combine these practices with real-world exposure. Start small. Next time you're out, intentionally hold eye contact a second longer than comfortable. Let a silence linger without rushing to fill it. Strike up a conversation with no agenda beyond enjoying the interaction. Each of these is a microdose of emotional training. The more you practice discomfort, the more natural steadiness becomes, and when you're on a date. That's your live fire exercise. Notice when approval-seeking thoughts creep in. Does she like me? Am I impressing her? And mentally zoom out. Bring your focus back to the present, the taste of your drink, the cadence of her voice. That grounded energy is contagious. Women don't fall for perfect performances. They're captivated by the man who's utterly at home in his own skin. This isn't about becoming emotionless, it's about becoming emotionally agile. Think of it like martial arts for your psyche. You're not blocking every hit, you're learning to roll with the punches so they don't knock you down. And when a woman sees that, she doesn't just see confidence, she sees something far rarer: a man who's free from desperation, free from the need to prove himself, free to connect without agenda. That's the secret Stoics knew centuries ago, and it still works today. Authenticity isn't just about being honest, it's about being unapologetically yourself, even when the world rewards pretense. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, put it bluntly: we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Think about that. How much energy do we waste crafting personas we think women will like, rather than embodying the men we truly are? Here's the paradox: the more you try to impress, the less impressive you become. But when you stop performing and start being, when your words, actions, and values align without contradiction, that's when you become magnetic. Consider this scenario: two men approach the same woman. The first rehearses lines, nods too eagerly, and laughs at jokes he doesn't find funny. The second speaks plainly, owns his quirks, and isn't afraid to disagree. Who commands respect? Who leaves her curious to know more? Authenticity signals strength because it requires zero validation. You're not tailoring yourself to fit her expectations, you're inviting her into your world. And that's irresistibly attractive. But let's be clear, authenticity isn't an excuse for roughness or lack of growth. Stoicism teaches prosody, the practice of self-awareness. It's about polishing your character, not masking it. Imagine a sculptor chiseling marble. He doesn't create something new, he reveals what's already there. That's the work. If you're shy, don't fake extroversion, cultivate calm presence. If you're opinionated, don't mute yourself, refine how you express ideas. Women can spot the difference between a man who's genuinely comfortable in his skin and one who's hiding behind a facade. Here's why this works on a deeper level. Trust is the foundation of attraction. When you're authentic, you eliminate the guesswork. She doesn't wonder, is this the real him? She knows, and that creates safety, a rare commodity in modern dating. Think of the men who complain, women only like jerks, no women like certainty. Even a flawed man who owns his flaws is preferable to a nice guy whose kindness is just a transaction for approval. So how do you cultivate this? Start with Seneca's nightly ritual. Ask yourself, did I live according to my values today? Not society's, not hers, yours. Did you speak up when you disagreed? Did you walk away from what didn't align with you? Every small act of integrity compounds into unwavering self-assurance. And when you stop seeking permission to exist as you are, something shifts. Women stop being gatekeepers of your worth. They become witnesses to it. This isn't theoretical. Studies show that authenticity triggers oxytocin, the bonding hormone, in others. When you're genuine, you literally chemically encourage connection. But here's the catch, you can't fake it to make it. The moment you strategize authenticity, you've lost it. That's why Stoicism focuses on internal alignment first. It's not, what will make her like me? It's, who am I when no one's watching? The most attractive men throughout history, from Socrates to Steve Jobs, weren't flawless. They were consistent. Their private and public selves matched, and that's the secret. When you stop performing, you start attracting. Not everyone will like the real you, and that's the point. The right ones will, and they'll stay for the man who doesn't bend because he doesn't need to. Vulnerability gets a bad rap in dating, especially among men. Some see it as weakness, others confuse it with pouring out their darkest secrets on a first date. But Stoicism flips the script. Real vulnerability isn't about spilling your guts. It's about standing firm in your imperfections without apology. Picture two men. One overshares his insecurities within minutes, seeking reassurance. The other casually mentions a past failure, not for sympathy, but as a footnote to his growth. Who earns respect? Who builds trust? That's the sweet spot where Stoic vulnerability lives. Take Marcus Aurelius again. His private journals weren't self-pitying confessions. They were raw reflections on his struggles as a leader, a father, a human. He wrote, "The obstacle is the way, not feel sorry for me." There's a critical difference between exposing wounds and showcasing scars. One screams neediness, the other whispers resilience. When you say, "I used to take rejection personally, then I realized it's just information," you're not begging for comfort, you're demonstrating self-awareness. And that's catnip for attraction. Here's where most men go wrong. They either armor up, completely afraid any crack will ruin their image, or they drown dates in unfiltered emotional dumping. Stoic vulnerability is the razor's edge between those extremes. Imagine mentioning a career setback over drinks. The oversharer lingers on how unfair it was, how he's still crushed. The Stoic, "That job loss forced me to pivot, now I'm doing work I actually love." Same event, radically different energy. One is a cry for validation, the other proves you can alchemize pain into strength. Women don't want a man who's never fallen, they want one who knows how to rise. This isn't theory. Studies on selective vulnerability show that revealing the right amount of personal struggle increases likability and connection, but only when it's framed as growth, not victimhood. Think of it like a movie hero's backstory. We don't admire Luke Skywalker because he whines about his dead parents. We root for him because he channels that loss into purpose. Your dating life is no different, so how do you practice this? Start with the Stoic filter. Before sharing something personal, ask, is this serving the connection or my ego? Talking about how you bombed a presentation last year, that's relatable. Rambling about your ex's betrayal, that's therapy, not conversation. Then watch your framing. Swap "I'm terrible at relationships" for "I've learned what I won't tolerate." See the shift, one's a dead end, the other's an invitation. The magic happens when you pair this with active listening. When she shares something vulnerable, match her level, don't one-up or retreat. If she mentions struggling with anxiety, try, "I get that. Meditation's been my anchor through stressful times." Not, "Oh my God, me too, let me tell you about my panic attacks." That balance, giving enough to be human, not so much that you're a burden, creates intimacy without neediness. Here's the unexpected truth: women aren't drawn to perfect men. They're drawn to men perfectly at peace with their imperfections. That's the Stoic superpower. You're not hiding your scars, you're wearing them as proof you've fought and grown. And when she sees that, she doesn't just like you, she trusts you. Because the man who owns his story without shame has nothing to prove and everything to offer. Epictetus, the former slave turned philosopher, dropped a truth bomb that still echoes 2,000 years later. Some things are within our power, others are not. Think about how many dating frustrations stem from ignoring that simple line. The anxious energy when she hasn't texted back, the frustration when plans fall through. The desperation to make someone like you, all of it comes from pouring your focus into the wrong bucket, the one labeled "things I can't control." Here's the Stoic pivot that changes everything. Attraction isn't about orchestrating outcomes, it's about mastering your input. Picture two men at a bar. The first obsesses over whether the woman across the room will reject him. His shoulders tense, his jokes feel forced, his eyes keep darting to her friends for approval. The second, he's focused on what's actually in his hands: his posture, his tone, his willingness to enjoy the moment regardless of her response. One is hostage to uncertainty, the other is free because he's playing a different game. That's the dichotomy of control in action. You can't command attraction, but you can craft the conditions where it's most likely to flourish. This isn't just philosophy, it's neuroscience. When you fixate on uncontrollable outcomes, your brain treats them as threats. Cortisol spikes, creativity flatlines, and suddenly you're that guy who blurts out awkward compliments. But when you anchor to effort, did I approach with confidence? Was I present in the conversation? You activate the prefrontal cortex, the region tied to calm decision-making. Translation: you become the man who's relaxed, engaging, and paradoxically more attractive because he's not trying to be. Let's get practical. Next time you're tempted to stress over whether she'll say yes, reframe the question: did I invite her out with clarity and warmth? If the answer's yes, your job is done. Her response, that's her department. Same with texting. Instead of agonizing over reply times, focus on sending messages that reflect your genuine self, then put the phone down. This subtle shift does two things. It removes the sting of rejection because your worth wasn't tied to the outcome, and it broadcasts an effortless confidence that's magnetic. Women sense when you're not emotionally invested in their every reaction, and that's precisely what makes them invest in you. History's greatest Stoics faced far worse than ghosting. Epictetus was crippled by a cruel master. Musonius Rufus was exiled to a barren island, yet they thrived by pouring energy into their one unshakable asset, their choices. Your dating life is no different. Can't control if she's attracted to you, fine, but you can control lifting weights so your posture commands a room. Can't force a connection, sure, but you can cultivate hobbies that make you fascinating to talk to. Every ounce of effort spent on your side of the equation compounds into a presence that's impossible to ignore. Here's where most men self-sabotage. They treat attention like a limited resource, scrambling to extract it from others instead of becoming a source worth paying attention to. Stoicism flips that script. When you focus on what you control, you stop chasing and start attracting. Not because you've tricked the system, but because you've stepped out of it entirely. You're no longer the guy sweating over algorithms or playing mind games. You're the man who knows his value doesn't fluctuate with someone else's mood. And that's the kind of calm certainty that turns heads without saying a word. So tonight, try this. Write down 3 things you can control in your dating life: your grooming, your attitude, your willingness to initiate. Then list 3 you can't: her interest, her past, how others perceive you. When the uncontrollables creep into your thoughts, mentally hand them back to the universe. It's not indifference, it's focus, and when you redirect that energy inward, something funny happens. The less you need validation, the more it finds you. Because confidence isn't about knowing you'll succeed, it's about knowing you'll be fine either way. That's the Stoic secret to becoming irresistible. Stop trying to be the sun everyone orbits and become the guy who's warm enough to draw them in naturally. Let's talk about dating with the precision of a Stoic architect. Imagine two men planning a first date. The first spends hours dissecting her texts. Why'd she use a period instead of an exclamation point? Then panics when she takes 3 hours to reply. The second, he spends that same energy designing an experience so engaging, her enthusiasm becomes inevitable. That's the Stoic shift, redirecting focus from "is she into me" to "am I offering something worth being into?" Here's how this plays out in reality. You invite her to a cocktail bar. The anxious guy picks the trendiest spot, not because he likes it, but because he thinks she will. He's mentally rehearsing every line, calculating how many drinks will loosen her up, and sweating whether she'll bail. The Stoic, he chooses a place with atmosphere he enjoys, maybe a speakeasy with live jazz because music sparks his curiosity. He's not scripting the night, he's creating a canvas where genuine connection can unfold. The difference isn't just confidence, it's energy economics. One man burns mental fuel on hypotheticals, the other invests in tangible quality. And here's the irony. When you pour effort into crafting memorable moments instead of decoding mixed signals, anxiety evaporates. Think of it like hosting a dinner party. The nervous host obsesses over whether guests like him, hovering awkwardly. The seasoned one focuses on serving great food, trusting the experience to work its magic. Same principle applies to dating. Your job isn't to engineer her attraction, it's to create conditions where it can grow naturally. Consider the text thread trap. Most guys overanalyze every message, treating silence like a crisis. The Stoic response: send a solid invite. There's this underground comedy club Friday, their improv troupe is hilarious. Join me, then close the app, no follow-up. If she doesn't reply instantly, no frantic meme barrage to keep her interested. Why? Because chasing attention screams scarcity. But when you're busy living a life worth sharing, silence isn't a rejection, it's a filter. This isn't just theory, it's neuroscience. The brain rewards action over rumination. Planning a hike or booking tickets to that museum exhibit you mentioned activates dopamine, the "I'm making progress" neurotransmitter, obsessing over her last snap story. That triggers cortisol, the stress hormone. Every minute spent curating experiences over dissecting mixed signals trains your brain to associate dating with creation, not desperation. Now apply this to ghosting. The average guy spirals. Was it something I said? Should I double text? The Stoic, he audits the only thing he controls: his effort. Did he show up as his best self? Was the date reflective of his values? If yes, he moves on, no postmortem. Because rejection isn't feedback on your worth, it's information about compatibility. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Internalize that, and every dating outcome becomes useful data, not a verdict. Practical tip: next time you're tempted to refresh her Instagram, channel that energy into experience design. Instead of wondering if she'll flake, research that new ramen spot with private booths. Swap screen stalking for skill building. Learn to mix her favorite cocktail or memorize a funny anecdote about the art gallery you're visiting. This pivot does more than reduce anxiety. It makes you the kind of man who turns dates into adventures. Women aren't projects to be perfected or puzzles to be solved. They're participants in a story you're already enjoying. When you focus on crafting chapters worth remembering, you stop worrying about who's reading and start attracting those who can't put the book down. That's the Stoic art of dating, building so compelling a life that the right people fight to be in it. Rejection stings, that's human, but what if you could rewire that sting into something far more useful? Enter Cato the Younger, the Stoic senator who made rejection his superpower. When political rivals mocked him, he didn't sulk, he doubled down on his principles. When crowds jeered, he stood taller. Why? Because he'd mastered the art of prohesis, the Stoic practice of distinguishing between what harms you and what merely happens to you. Here's the mindset shift. Rejection isn't a verdict on your worth, it's data. It's the universe whispering, not this door, try the next one. Think of it like a chef tasting his own dish. If a customer sends back the steak, the amateur takes it personally. The master chef, he asks, is it under-seasoned, overcooked, and adjusts. Dating operates on the same principle. That woman who ghosted after 2 great dates, instead of spiraling into "I'm not good enough," ask, did I miss alignment in values? Was the connection as strong as I thought? This isn't coping, it's calibration. History's most magnetic men didn't avoid rejection, they leveraged it. Thomas Edison framed 10,000 failed experiments as finding ways that don't work. J.K. Rowling pinned her 12 publisher rejections to her wall as fuel. What separated them from the crowd wasn't talent alone, it was their refusal to let rejection define reality. Here's how to adopt that stance. Next time you're turned down, play the Stoic detective. Analyze without judgment. Was it timing, chemistry, logistics? Sometimes the answer is as simple as she prefers bearded guys, a preference as neutral as liking vanilla over chocolate. But here's where most men derail. They treat rejection like a grenade to their ego when it's really a GPS recalibration. Imagine 2 job candidates. One gets rejected and rails about unfair hiring. The other audits his interview skills, then lands a better role. Which mindset would you bet on? Dating's no different. The guy who hears "you're not my type" and thinks next conserves energy for connections that actually fit. Now let's talk tactics. The Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, premeditating adversity. Before approaching a woman, mentally rehearse her saying no. Not to breed pessimism, but to neuter fear. When you've already accepted the worst-case outcome, rejection loses its fangs. This isn't hypothetical. Studies show that visualizing failure reduces anxiety and improves performance. The ancient warriors knew it, so do elite athletes, and when you approach dating with that detached curiosity, something shifts, your shoulders relax. Your humor flows because you're no longer attached to an outcome, you're there to discover, not to win. The magic lies in reframing rejection as redirection. Cato didn't just endure political defeats, he used them to refine his rhetoric. The woman who says, "I don't feel a spark," isn't rejecting you, she's honoring both your time by not faking it. That's integrity, and when you mirror that honesty, when you stop chasing maybes and invest in hell yeses, you don't just become more attractive, you become unfazed. Because the man who knows his path isn't rattled by detours, he's too busy moving forward, so the next time rejection knocks, thank it. It's not keeping you out, it's steering you toward what's truly yours. Here's a radical idea. What if every rejection didn't chip away at your confidence but actually built it? That's the power of the rejection journal, a Stoic tool that transforms setbacks into stepping stones. Picture this, instead of replaying that awkward moment she walked away at the bar, you open a notebook and dissect it with the cool detachment of a scientist studying data. No self-pity, no drama, just pure, actionable insight, because here's the truth women instinctively sense. The man who learns from rejection becomes bulletproof, and that kind of resilience is magnetic. Start with the facts, no emotional spin. Write exactly what happened. Approached woman in bookstore. Conversation flowed for 5 minutes. She smiled but declined giving her number, saying she's seeing someone. Now the Stoic twist, analyze your half of the interaction. Not her reasons, those are her business. Focus on what you controlled. Did you maintain strong eye contact? Was your opener genuine or rehearsed? Did you pick up on subtle cues? This isn't about blaming yourself, it's about refining your skills. Marcus Aurelius kept journals not to wallow but to sharpen his leadership. Your dating life deserves the same precision. The magic happens when you spot patterns. After 10 entries, you might notice, conversations die when I focus too much on impressing vs. connecting, or I do better in quiet settings than loud clubs. Those aren't failures, they're cheat codes. Like a Stoic version of a /B testing, you're uncovering what works for your authentic style. And when you stop fearing rejection and start mining it for gold, your entire energy shifts. Women notice the guy who isn't rattled by a no because he's too busy evolving. But here's the key: pair each entry with a correction plan. If you froze mid-conversation, jot down 2 openers for next time. Got ghosted, note, next first date, suggest a weekday drink, lower stakes than dinner. This turns the journal from a postmortem into a training manual. Ancient Stoics called this premeditatio, anticipating challenges to disarm them. By rehearsing adjustments, you're not just coping with rejection, you're outgrowing it. And here's the unexpected bonus. Over time, the journal becomes a confidence booster. Flip through old entries and you'll see progress, awkward approaches polished into smooth exchanges, nervous laughter replaced with calm humor. That tangible growth is rocket fuel for self-assurance, because the man who watches himself improve stops fearing failure and starts respecting his resilience. And that quiet knowing, the kind that comes from earned experience, not empty affirmations, is what makes women lean in closer. So tonight, grab any notebook. After your next rejection, spend 2 minutes logging it like a Stoic scout, detached, curious, hungry to learn. What felt off, what felt right, then close it and move on. No dwelling, no rumination, just steady progress, because the most attractive men aren't those who never fall, they're the ones who have learned how to land. And every entry in that journal, that's you landing a little softer, rising a little faster, and becoming infinitely more irresistible along the way. There's a quiet kind of magnetism that surrounds a man who knows where he's going, not just in conversation, but in life. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who shaped generations of thinkers, put it bluntly: a ship without a destination drifts aimlessly, battered by every wave. Now picture 2 men. One molds himself to fit whatever woman he's with, agreeing with her music taste, downplaying his passions, scrambling to mirror her opinions. The other, he's got a North Star. Whether it's building a business, mastering a craft, or serving a cause, his sense of purpose is so palpable, it pulls people into his orbit. That's the difference between chasing attention and commanding it. Purpose isn't about having your entire life mapped out. It's about having non-negotiables, values, and pursuits so deeply ingrained that you'd cling to them even if no one ever noticed. Think of Marcus Aurelius penning his journals not for fame, but to refine his character, or Theodore Roosevelt pushing through political ridicule because his mission outweighed his critics. That unwavering focus does something fascinating to your presence. Women don't just see you, they sense the gravitational pull of a man who's too busy building to beg for validation. Here's why this works on a primal level. Purpose signals security. Evolutionarily, women are wired to seek partners who offer stability, not just financially, but emotionally and directionally. A man who shifts with the wind, he's a liability, but a man who stands firm in his vision, he's a safe harbor in life's storms. This isn't speculation. Studies on attraction show that ambition and life goals consistently rank higher than looks or even income in long-term desirability. Not because women are gold diggers, but because purpose predicts resilience, and resilience is sexy. But let's clear a misconception. Purpose isn't about grandiose declarations or performative hustle. Musonius taught that true telos, your ultimate aim, should be living virtuously. That could mean raising exceptional children, creating art that moves people, or simply being the rock your community relies on. The scale doesn't matter, the authenticity does. Ever met someone who lights up talking about their work restoring vintage cars or teaching kids to read? That spark is contagious. Contrast that with a guy who name drops his corporate title but can't hide his emptiness. Women detect the difference instantly. So how do you cultivate this? Start with Musonius' 3 questions. 1. What would I pursue if no one ever applauded me for it? 2. What problems or injustices stir me to action without prompting? 3. At the end of my life, what legacy would pain me to have neglected? Your answers reveal the seeds of purpose. Maybe it's environmental activism, maybe it's composing music, maybe it's mentoring foster kids. The key is to nurture those passions first, not as a tactic to attract women, but as a non-negotiable part of your identity. Ironically, that's when attraction ignites. Because when you're consumed by meaningful work, you stop orbiting women and become a sun they can't help but circle. Practical tip: audit your calendar. How many hours this week were spent chasing validation versus chasing mastery? If the ratio's skewed, recalibrate. Join a martial arts dojo. Volunteer at that animal shelter. Take night classes in architecture. It doesn't need to be world-changing. It needs to be you-changing. And when you're on a date, talk about these pursuits with the quiet intensity of someone who's found his path. Not to impress her, but because they're too vital to leave unspoken. History's most captivating men, from Leonardo da Vinci to Muhammad Ali, weren't universally liked. But they were unignorable. Their purpose acted like a filter, repelling those who didn't resonate, magnetizing those who did. That's the Stoic secret. When you stop trimming your sails to catch every breeze of approval, you start moving toward what truly matters, and the right women, they'll gladly come aboard for the voyage. Consider this: the most compelling men in history weren't just skilled or charismatic, they were oriented. They moved through the world with the quiet certainty of someone who'd already answered life's central question. What is my work here? That's the power of a mission statement, not a corporate buzzword, but a stoic compass that aligns your choices, filters distractions, and yes, magnetizes the right women without you lifting a finger to chase them. Start by borrowing a page from Epictetus. First, tell yourself what kind of person you want to be, then do what you must to become it. Your mission isn't about impressing others, it's about excavating your core. Think of it like building a lighthouse. You don't construct it to lure ships, you build it to stand unwavering in storms, and yet ships navigate toward it. That's the paradox. When your purpose is solid, attraction becomes a side effect, not a target. Here's how to craft yours. Grab a notebook and answer 3 questions with brutal honesty. 1. What pain or problem in the world ignites my anger or grief? Stoics believed our deepest callings often hide in what we're desperate to fix. 2. What activities make me lose track of time? Not what looks impressive on Instagram, what genuinely absorbs you. 3. What legacy would devastate me to leave unrealized? Think decades, not months. Your answers might surprise you. Maybe you're gutted by food waste and start a composting initiative. Perhaps you lose hours tinkering with engines and realize you're meant to teach underprivileged kids mechanical skills. That's your raw material. Now distill it into one sentence. My mission is to use skill/passion to impact for group/cause. Example: my mission is to use storytelling to preserve veterans' histories for future generations. Notice what's not there: to get rich or to date models. Women smell self-serving agendas from miles away, but a mission rooted in service, that's catnip. Why? Because conviction is contagious. Picture 2 men at a dinner party. One boasts about his startup's valuation. The other's eyes light up describing his literacy nonprofit's latest win. Who intrigues? Who invites follow-up questions? Purpose isn't just attractive, it's generative. It gives others permission to engage with your world. But here's the critical pivot: your mission must be lived, not laminated. Stoicism rejects performative virtue. If you claim to value environmentalism but can't name local conservation efforts, that's a red flag. Authentic purpose leaks into everything: how you spend weekends, where you volunteer, even your dating preferences. A man committed to mental health advocacy will naturally screen for emotional intelligence in partners. That's the filter at work. History's great Stoics modeled this. Cicero didn't just write about justice, he died defending the Roman Republic. Seneca didn't philosophize about wealth, he gave away fortunes. Their missions weren't slogans, they were skeletons holding their lives upright. And that integrity, it drew allies, students, and yes, lovers without effort. Practical step: audit your last month. How many hours aligned with your mission? Did your conversations reflect it? Your social media, your dates? Women aren't blind. They notice when a man's actions whisper, "I'm lost," versus roar, "I'm building." And here's the secret: they're wired to gravitate toward the latter, because a man who knows where he's going isn't just attractive, he's safe. He's proven he can navigate storms. And in a world of drifters, that's irresistible. So tonight, write that first draft, not in corporate jargon, but in blood and bone. Then test it for 6 months. Refine it, live it, watch how it reshapes not just who you attract, but who you are. Because the Stoic secret isn't becoming magnetic. It's becoming so grounded in your purpose that magnetism stops being something you chase and starts being something you embody. There's a reason why the ancient Stoics didn't just talk about resilience, they actively sought out discomfort. Seneca, in his letters, wrote about sleeping on hard floors, wearing thin clothes in winter, and skipping meals, not because he enjoyed suffering, but because he understood a profound truth: comfort is the enemy of growth. Fast forward to modern dating, and you'll spot the same pattern. The guy who crumbles when plans change or panics when he's out of his element, he's the one scrambling for attention. But the man who's voluntarily endured cold showers, fasted for clarity, or traveled solo to unfamiliar places, he carries himself differently, not because he's trying to impress, but because hardship has sanded down his edges into unshakable confidence. And women feel that. Let's break down why this works. When you intentionally step into discomfort, you're sending a subconscious signal to your brain: I can handle this. Cold showers aren't about hygiene, they're micro-training for life's bigger challenges. That moment when icy water hits your skin and every instinct screams to retreat, but you stay put. That's the same muscle you flex when a date tests your patience or when rejection stings. Over time, these small acts of discipline compound into a presence that doesn't waver. Think of it like a mental gym. You wouldn't expect to bench press 200 pounds without training, yet men expect unflappable confidence without ever conditioning their resilience. Here's where most men miss the mark. They mistake comfort for safety, avoiding anything that feels like struggle. But Seneca warned that a life of constant ease makes you soft. Fortune falls heavily on those unprepared. Contrast two men on a first date. One panics when the restaurant loses their reservation, fumbling for solutions. The other chuckles, suggests a food truck across the street, and turns the mishap into an adventure. Guess who leaves a lasting impression? It's not about the circumstance, it's about the energy you bring to it. And that energy is forged in those daily moments where you choose discomfort over convenience. But this isn't just philosophical, it's biological. Studies on stress inoculation show that controlled exposure to hardship, like cold exposure or fasting, literally rewires your nervous system. Your body learns that discomfort isn't a threat but a signal to adapt. That's why Navy SEAL train in freezing water and sleep deprivation. They're not just building endurance, they're cultivating the ability to stay calm under pressure. And in dating, pressure is everywhere. The text that goes unanswered, the awkward silence, the unexpected curveball, they're all tests. The man who's voluntarily faced worse. He's not just passing those tests, he's acing them without breaking a sweat. Practical steps: start small. Take a cold shower tomorrow, not a quick dip, but 2 full minutes underwater that makes your lungs seize. Notice the urge to quit, then stay anyway. Skip breakfast once a week and observe how hunger sharpens your focus. Walk home a longer route in the rain without complaining. These aren't punishments, they're rehearsals for the moments that matter. Because when you're on a date with a woman who's out of your league, or so you think, and your old insecurities creep in, you'll have a reservoir of proof that you've handled worse. That's the secret sauce. Confidence isn't something you fake, it's something you earn one uncomfortable choice at a time. And here's the kicker: women don't just notice this, they're biologically drawn to it. Research shows that traits like grit and emotional stability rank higher than looks or income in long-term attractiveness. Why? Because on a primal level, a man who can endure, who thrives under pressure, signals he'll be a reliable partner when life gets hard. It's not about showing off, it's about embodying a mindset that says, "I've got this," even when you don't. So the next time you're tempted to hit snooze or scroll past a challenge, ask yourself, am I building the kind of man women can't ignore? Because the path to being irresistible isn't paved with shortcuts, it's lined with the obstacles you willingly face. Here's the irony most men never see: the very things we avoid, awkward conversations, social risks, even boredom, are the exact experiences that forge the unshakable confidence women crave. Take approaching strangers. Your palms sweat at the thought of saying hello to a woman at the bookstore. That's not fear. It's your brain's misguided attempt to protect you from imagined tribal rejection. But here's what Stoics like Epictetus knew: discomfort is the whetstone that sharpens your social edge. Every forced smile at a networking event, every cold approach you push through, every time you strike up a conversation with a barrister instead of staring at your phone, these aren't just exercises. They're resistance training for your charisma. Now let's talk digital detox, a modern spin on ancient Stoic discipline. Picture two men on a first date. One peeks at his phone every notification, his attention fractured by the dopamine drip of social media. The other, his phone stays in his pocket. He's not just present, he's comfortable in the silence, unafraid of gaps in conversation because he's practiced sitting with his own thoughts for hours offline. That's the power of intentional discomfort. When you voluntarily disconnect from constant stimulation, you rewire your ability to connect deeply. Think of it like this: the guy who can endure a solo hike without music or an hour in line without scrolling isn't just building patience. He's cultivating the rare ability to be fully immersed in the moment. And that's catnip for attraction, but here's where most men get stuck. They mistake comfort for confidence, avoiding anything that feels like vulnerability. Yet history's most magnetic figures, from Socrates to Steve Jobs, leaned into discomfort as a competitive advantage. Jobs famously conducted meetings during long walks, embracing physical strain to sharpen focus. The Stoics, they practiced voluntary hardship, like sleeping on the floor or wearing thin cloaks in winter, not as punishment, but to prove to themselves that luxury was optional. Apply that to dating. The man who's willingly endured the sting of rejection or the awkwardness of approaching strangers isn't rattled by a bad date. He's been tempered by experience. Practical steps start with micro exposures. Next time you're at a coffee shop, ask the barista her name instead of rushing your order. Leave your phone at home during weekend errands. Sign up for an improv class. Nothing accelerates comfort with uncertainty faster than standing on stage with no script. These aren't tricks to get good at dating. They're challenges that rewire your relationship with discomfort itself. Because here's the secret women instinctively recognize: the man who embraces awkwardness stops fearing it. And when you're genuinely unbothered by social friction, you radiate the kind of ease that pulls people in. The proof is in the science. Studies on stress inoculation show that controlled exposure to social discomfort, like public speaking drills, reduces anxiety more effectively than avoidance. Your amygdala, the brain's panic button, learns that awkwardness won't kill you. That's why Navy SEAL train in chaotic simulations. By the time real combat hits, their nervous systems stay calm. Dating operates on the same principle. The more you voluntarily step into social discomfort, the more composed you become when it matters. But here's the real payoff. This isn't just about attraction, it's about freedom. The man who's at peace with discomfort doesn't just attract women, he navigates life with a Stoic's calm. Setbacks become data, silence becomes space. Rejection becomes redirection, and that transformation, it starts with one uncomfortable choice at a time. Because the irony is delicious, the more you seek comfort, the needier you seem. But embrace life's friction willingly, and you'll exude the kind of effortless assurance that doesn't just draw women in, it keeps them captivated. Imagine being in a conversation where the other person isn't just waiting for their turn to speak. They're fully engrossed in your words, absorbing every nuance without rushing to judge or steer the discussion. That's the power of Stoic listening, and it's one of the most underrated tools in dating. Epictetus put it bluntly, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. But here's where most men miss the mark. They think listening is just nodding along until they can pivot to their next talking point. Real listening, Stoic listening, is about presence, not strategy. It's the difference between hearing and receiving. Consider this scenario, you're on a date, and she mentions her frustration with her job. The manipulative listener sees an opening, she's vulnerable. Time to rescue her, and jumps in with unsolicited advice or flexes about his own career. The Stoic, he leans in slightly, asks what part of it drains you the most. And lets silence linger after her answer. No agenda, no rush to impress, just genuine curiosity. That's the paradox. When you stop using conversations as stepping stones to validation, you become infinitely more validating to be around. Women notice this instantly. They're surrounded by men who perform. The man who truly listens, he's a rarity. This isn't just etiquette, it's neuroscience. Studies on attentional synchrony show that when 2 people engage in focused, agenda-free conversation, their brainwaves actually start to align. That's the biological basis of connection. But here's the catch, you can't fake it. The second you're listening to get something, her number, her approval, her attraction, your energy shifts, your eyes flicker with calculation. She senses it. Stoic listening works because it's rooted in apathy in the ancient sense, total indifference to outcomes. You're not listening to win, you're listening to understand. And that shift alone makes you magnetic. Let's break down the mechanics. First, eye contact without intensity. Locked-on stares feel predatory, gentle focus feels respectful. Second, the pause principle. When she finishes a thought, count 2 full seconds in your head before responding. Those silences feel like eternity to the anxious, but to her, they signal confidence. Third, reflective minimalism. Instead of peppering her with questions like an interrogator, sprinkle in brief reflections, so the corporate politics overshadow the actual work. This mirrors her thoughts without hijacking them. Now contrast this with so-called game tactics, those scripted routines designed to extract attraction. The Stoics would have scoffed. Epictetus wrote, "What's mine is mine to give, what isn't I can't claim." Attraction isn't something you extract, it's something you earn through authentic engagement. The man who listens like a Stoic isn't collecting ammunition for his next clever line. He's building a bridge to another mind, and when she crosses that bridge, she's not just attracted, she's invested. Practical exercise. Next conversation you have, pretend you'll be tested on 3 details the other person shared. Not to recite them later, that's performative, but to train your brain to stay present. Notice their speech patterns, when they speed up, when they pause. Those subtle cues reveal more than any dating profile ever could. Over time, this becomes second nature. You'll catch yourself actually enjoying conversations instead of enduring them as a means to an end. The magic lies in the unintended consequences. When you listen without scheming, something funny happens. She starts chasing your validation, not because you withheld it, but because you gave it so freely that it became valuable. That's the Stoic secret. Connection isn't about control. It's about surrender to the moment, to the person in front of you, to the possibility that you might learn something unexpected. And in a world of men shouting to be heard, the one who listens like a sage, he's the one who gets remembered. Most conversations don't suffer from too little talking. They drown in rushed responses. That's where the Stoic 3-second rule comes in. Before you reply, pause, not a theatrical silence, but a deliberate beat, long enough to let her words settle, short enough to feel natural. Picture this: she shares a vulnerable story about her childhood. The impatient guy jumps in with a similar anecdote, making it about him. The Stoic, he lets those 3 seconds stretch. His eyes stay steady, he might nod slightly, then when he speaks, it's not to fill space, it's to reflect depth. That kind of loneliness leaves marks. How do you learn to trust after that? That gap changes everything. It signals you're not just waiting to talk, you're processing what matters. This isn't about playing mind games, it's about respect. Ancient Stoics practiced prosody, the art of attentive presence. Epictetus taught that true listening requires holding your mind still as water in a cup. Modern research backs this. Studies show responses delayed by just 2 to 3 seconds are perceived as more thoughtful and empathetic. But here's the twist: most men fear silence like a vacuum, rushing to stuff it with jokes or questions. The 3-second rule flips that. It teaches you to welcome the gap because that's where connection crystallizes. Watch how this plays out in real dialogue. Without the pause, her, "I almost quit my job last week." Him, "Yeah, my boss is the worst too." With the pause, her, "I almost quit my job last week." 3 seconds, him, "That's a big turning point. What kept you from walking out?" The first version glosses over her pain to spotlight his, the second. It invites her to unfold. That's the magnetic effect. When you pause, you telegraph that her thoughts are worth digesting. And when people feel heard, they lean in closer. Try this tonight. In your next conversation, mentally count 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi before responding. Notice how the dynamic shifts. At first, it'll feel unnatural, like holding your breath underwater. But soon, you'll catch nuances you used to miss. The hesitation before she mentions her ex, the brightness when she describes her passion project. Those are the threads real connections are woven from. The Stoics knew this secret centuries ago. Meaning isn't found in the noise, it's in the spaces between. And the man comfortable in those spaces, he doesn't just hear words, he hears worlds. Marcus Aurelius stared into his aging reflection not with despair but with quiet gratitude, a practice modern men would do well to steal. While today's dating scene screams that chiseled abs and perfect hairlines are non-negotiable, Stoicism whispers a radical alternative: amor fati, the love of fate. Imagine 2 men at the beach. One slouches, sucking in his stomach between glances at younger, leaner bodies. The other, maybe carrying scars or softness, strides into the waves without apology, his ease broadcasting something rare. This vessel carries me through life's adventures and I honor it. Which energy do you think draws women in closer? Here's the truth we've been sold. Attraction is about hitting some arbitrary aesthetic benchmark. Here's the truth Stoics knew. Attraction is about the relationship you have with your own skin. When Marcus wrote about accepting his aging body, take what nature gives you. The body is merely a vessel for the mind. He wasn't endorsing neglect. He was advocating for owning your form while refining it. That's the razor's edge, loving yourself enough to improve, but not hinging your worth on some distant ideal. Think of it like maintaining a vintage car. You polish the chrome and replace worn parts not because you hate it, but because you respect its history and potential. Science backs this up. Studies on body neutrality, the practice of viewing your body as an instrument rather than an ornament, show that men who adopt this mindset report higher confidence and lower dating anxiety. Not because they've achieved perfection, but because they've decoupled their self-worth from their reflection. Contrast that with the guy who skips social events until he's shredded enough, only to realize six-pack abs didn't magically erase his insecurities. The Stoic approach: train like you respect your body, eat like you honor it, but refuse to let its shape dictate your joy. Let's talk practical reframing. Next time you catch yourself critiquing your appearance, deploy the Stoic mirror drill. 1. Name one function your body performed today, e.g., carried me through my morning run. 2. Recall one pleasure it enabled, e.g., felt the sun on my shoulders. 3. Acknowledge one improvement you're working toward, e.g., adding 5 pounds to my deadlift. This isn't self-help fluff. It's processual, mindful attention applied to self-image. You're not ignoring flaws, you're contextualizing them. And when you stop treating your body like a problem to be fixed and start treating it like a partner in your journey, your entire aura shifts. Women notice they're surrounded by men who project either arrogant posturing or cringing self-loathing. The man who's simply at peace, that's the anomaly that lingers in her memory. History's most magnetic figures mastered this balance. Hemingway carried scars and paunch but wrote about his body as a reliable old tool. Chaplin turned his unremarkable physique into a global symbol of charm. They understood what modern filters obscure. Attraction isn't about conforming to standards, it's about transcending the need for them. So lift weights, yes. Dress sharply, absolutely, but do it as a celebration of what you have, not a punishment for what you lack. Because the man who loves his form while honing it doesn't just look good, he radiates something no six-pack can replicate, the unshakable certainty that he's already enough. Physical training wasn't just about strength to the Stoics, it was about integrity. When Musonius Rufus insisted his students sweat through grueling workouts, he wasn't grooming athletes, he was forging men who could keep promises to themselves. That's the distinction most missed today. The guy grinding in the gym for Instagram likes, he's chasing validation. The man who treats his body like a temple, not for show, but because self-respect demands it. That's the discipline women instinctively trust. Picture two men at sunrise. One forces himself out of bed, groaning through push-ups while counting days until he can quit. The other moves with purposeful rhythm, not punishing his body but honoring it. Both might build similar physiques, but their energy couldn't be more different. Women sense this. They've met the first type, the one who brags about his deadlift numbers but crumbles when life gets hard. The second, his consistency whispers what no pickup line ever could. I do what I say I'll do. That's the Stoic secret. Fitness isn't about aesthetics. It's about proving to yourself that you can endure discomfort for a higher purpose. Ancient Sparta took this further. Their warriors trained relentlessly, not for vanity, but to embody arete excellence of character. A soldier who could master his body, they believed, could master his impulses in battle. Modern dating operates on the same principle. The man who drags himself out for pre-dawn runs when no one's watching. He's the same man who won't panic when a date tests his patience or when rejection stings. That correlation isn't coincidental. Every drop of sweat is a brick in the foundation of your unshakable presence. But here's where most men derail. They treat fitness as a transaction. If I get shredded, women will like me. The Stoics would have scoffed. Epictetus warned against seeking external rewards, urging disciples to tie your well-being to what you control. Translation: train because it steals your will, not because it might impress someone. Ironically, that's when attraction ignites, when she notices you passing on dessert, not with martyrdom but quiet resolve, or when you mention your hiking ritual not as a flex but as a fact. That's authenticity in motion. Practical shift: next workout, replace "how do I look" with "how do I feel." Lifting weights becomes a meditation on progress, not punishment. Meals aren't restrictive, they're rituals fueling your mission. This mindset echoes beyond the gym. The guy who skips workouts when he's stressed is the same guy who ghosts when conversations get deep, but the man who maintains discipline. He shows up for his health, his goals, and ultimately for the people in his life. History's most admired men, from Teddy Roosevelt to Bruce Lee, didn't train for compliments. They cultivated physical prowess as an extension of their philosophy. Lee famously said, "The body is the servant of the mind." That's the Stoic ideal. When your sweat serves your character, not your ego, every rep becomes a silent testament to your worth. And in a world where most men quit at the first sign of discomfort, that kind of steadfastness doesn't just turn heads, it earns respect, because the body you build in the gym is secondary to the man you become along the way. Think about the last time you heard someone trash talking a coworker or dissecting a friend's breakup with relish. How did it make you feel? Trust eroded, energy drained, maybe even a quiet urge to step back. That's the invisible cost of gossip, and the Stoics saw it coming 2,000 years ago. Epictetus warned, when you indulge in petty talk, you're not just wasting time, you're leaking integrity. Now imagine two men at a dinner party. One leans in conspiratorially. "Did you hear about Sarah's meltdown last weekend?" The other changes the subject with a chuckle. "Let's just say I'm glad I wasn't the one cleaning up after that karaoke night." One spreads poison, the other deflects with humor but refuses to engage. Which man do you think women instinctively gravitate toward for deeper conversations? This isn't about being prudish, it's about protecting your energy. Ancient Stoics practiced prosody, mindfulness of speech, recognizing words as currency of character. When you refuse to traffic in drama, you become a rare haven in a world starved for emotional safety. Studies on attraction reveal that women consistently rank emotional stability as a top trait in long-term partners, above income or even looks. Why? Because negativity is contagious. The guy who bitches about his ex or vents about his friend's flaws isn't just sharing. He's broadcasting that he'll eventually turn that same critical lens on her. Let's dissect the mechanics. Gossip often masquerades as bonding. Can you believe he did that? Feels like camaraderie in the moment, but Stoicism teaches that true connection comes from shared values, not shared enemies. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What injures the hive injures the bee." Every time you participate in tearing someone down, even passively, you're damaging your own dignity. Contrast that with the man who steers conversations toward ideas, adventures, or light-hearted absurdities. He's not avoiding depth, he's choosing depth that builds rather than destroys. Women notice this. They're surrounded by men who use sarcasm as armor or gossip as social glue. The man who rises above, he's the one they confide in. Practical shift: adopt the Stoic speech filter. Before speaking, ask 1. Is this true? Not just did it happen, but am I presenting it without distortion? 2. Is it necessary? Does sharing this serve a purpose, or is it just filling air? 3. Is it kind, not soft kind? Sometimes truth requires firmness, but never cruelty. Notice how this transforms interactions. When coworkers drag someone absent, try, "I've got no perspective on that, but I can tell you about the insane falafel truck I found." If a date prods for dirty details on your ex, counter with, "We grew apart, but I can tell you about the worst first date I ever survived." You're not dodging, you're redirecting toward connection that doesn't require collateral damage. The payoff is subtle but profound. Women describe feeling safe around certain men without knowing why. It's this: when you're known as the guy who doesn't indulge in petty drama, you become the one they trust with their insecurities, their ambitions, their unpolished thoughts. Because they've seen you handle other stories with discretion, and that's how they know you'll handle theirs. Stoicism didn't just teach silence, it taught discernment. The man who masters that doesn't just avoid toxicity, he becomes the antidote. Here's a radical experiment. For the next 7 days, record snippets of your conversations, not to critique your eloquence or wit, but to conduct a Stoic speech audit. This isn't about polishing your charm, it's about excavating the hidden patterns in your words. The ancient Stoics believed language was a mirror of character, every offhand joke, every muttered complaint, every gossipy aside revealing who you truly are. So imagine listening back to a week of your dialogue through Marcus Aurelius' ears. Would he hear a man who speaks with integrity or one who leaks dignity in small, unconscious ways? Start with the mechanics. Use your phone's voice memo app to capture casual exchanges, coffee shop banter, work calls, even disagreements. Don't perform, just live as you normally would. Then in private, replay them with a Stoic lens. Listen for 3 things. 1. Unnecessary negativity. That sigh when you mentioned your boss's new policy. The eye roll in your voice mocking a friend's dating choices. Stoicism teaches that cynicism is a slow poison. It doesn't just harm your mood, it corrodes your credibility. 2. Ego injections. Count how often you steer conversations back to yourself. That reminds me of when I would have handled it like. Even subtle bids for validation reveal neediness. Epictetus warned, if you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless. 3. Truth gaps, those white lies to avoid discomfort. I'd love to, but I'm busy. When you just didn't want to go, Stoics viewed honesty as a muscle. Every tiny evasion weakens it. Now the uncomfortable part. Transcribe your most cringe-worthy moments. Seeing your words on paper strips away the charisma of your delivery. That funny jab at your gym buddy's diet, on paper it reads as petty. The dramatic retelling of a co-worker's mistake suddenly looks like insecurity masquerading as storytelling. This is where growth happens, but here's the twist. This isn't about self-flagellation. The Stoics paired radical self-honesty with radical self-compassion. When Seneca analyzed his daily errors, he wrote, I pardon myself today so I may improve tomorrow. So after your audit, choose one pattern to reform. Maybe it's replacing gossip with curiosity. How's Sarah doing since her breakup? Instead of, did you hear what Sarah did? Or swapping complaints with solutions. Traffic was brutal, but I used the time to listen to that philosophy lecture. The payoff: women and people generally subconsciously register these shifts. They notice when your words carry weight because they're no longer diluted by negativity or posturing. Think of the last person you met who spoke with measured honesty, who didn't indulge in petty chatter but wasn't sanctimonious either. Didn't you lean in a little closer? That's the magnetism of aligned speech. It whispers, this man isn't sculpting his image, he's living by a code. And in a world of performative banter and hollow flattery, that kind of substance doesn't just stand out, it resonates. Solitude wasn't just a retreat for Seneca, it was a forge where self-reliance was tempered and neediness melted away. Picture this: most men dread the idea of cancelling plans to stay in, terrified of being labeled boring or worse, alone. But the Stoic, he carves out evenings with the same intentionality others reserve for dates, lighting a candle not for ambience but as a ritual to signal, this time is sacred. That's the paradox. The man who cultivates richness in solitude doesn't just avoid clinginess. He becomes more alluring because his presence feels like a gift, not a given. Consider how this plays out in modern dating. The guy who texts constantly, who reshapes his schedule at a whim to accommodate hers, who panics when she takes hours to reply. He broadcasts desperation, whether he means to or not. Contrast that with the man who disappears for an afternoon hike or spends Sundays tinkering in his workshop. No apologies, no explanations. His absence isn't neglect, it's proof of a life so full that no single person monopolizes it. Women sense this distinction immediately. Clinginess suffocates, mystery intrigues. And solitude is the ultimate cultivator of mystery. Seneca wrote letters praising his solo retreats to the countryside, not as escapes from society but as reunions with himself. Be a friend to yourself, he urged, and you'll never be alone. That's the core truth most men miss. The anxiety driving them to constant contact isn't about connection, it's about an unaddressed void within. Stoic solitude isn't empty, it's productive. It's where you audit your thoughts like a philosopher accountant, separating wisdom from worry. Ever noticed how the most centered people don't rush to fill silences? That's because they've rehearsed them. Practical applications start with micro-solitudes. Turn off the podcast during your commute and let your mind wander. Eat one meal a week at that cafe alone, not buried in your phone but observing the street ballet. These aren't acts of isolation, they're resistance training against the modern itch for constant stimulation. And when you're on a date, that cultivated comfort with quiet means you won't scramble to fill pauses with nervous chatter. You'll let moments breathe, and in those breaths attraction builds. But here's where most misinterpret Stoic solitude. It's not about becoming a hermit or playing hard to get. Seneca partied with Rome's elite yet guarded his solo hours fiercely. The balance is key. A man who's only solitary seems detached, one who's never alone seems dependent. The magic lies in oscillations, being fully present when together, fully content when apart. That's the rhythm women find irresistible, the sense that you choose them not because you need to, but because you want to. So tonight, try this. Block 2 hours where your phone stays in another room. Read Seneca's letters, sketch that idea brewing in your mind, or just stare at the ceiling. At first, it'll feel like waiting, then like coming home. And when you re-enter the world of texts and dates, you'll carry a new aura. Not of someone starved for attention, but of someone who's learned the rarest skill of all, how to be his own best company. There's a peculiar magic to walking into a restaurant alone, sitting at the bar, and ordering exactly what you crave. No compromises, no small talk, just the quiet pleasure of your own company. This isn't loneliness, it's luxury. The Stoics called it autarky, the art of being self-sufficient in your joy. Think of it like this. The man who needs a crowd to feel alive is like a candle starved for oxygen, flickering wildly to stay lit. But the man who's learned to dine alone, to wander museums uninterrupted, to lose hours in a bookstore without glancing at his phone, he burns with a steady, inviting glow. And that's the kind of light women can't help but notice. Start with the museum test. Most men only visit cultural spaces on dates, treating art as background noise to impress someone. The Stoic flips this. He goes alone, lingering at paintings that pull him in, skipping entire wings that don't. No agenda, no performance, just raw, unfiltered curiosity. Here's why this matters. When you're comfortable exploring the world solo, you stop treating women as tour guides to your own enjoyment. You become the kind of man who brings experiences to the table rather than scavenging for them. Imagine describing a Rothko painting to her later, not because you studied up to sound cultured, but because you genuinely stood before those color fields and felt something. That's authenticity no script can replicate. Then there's the solo dinner, not the rushed takeout at your desk, but the deliberate act of sitting at a chef's counter with a book or just your thoughts. At first, it'll feel like everyone's staring. They're not. And even if they were, here's the Stoic reframe. Their glances reveal more about their discomfort with solitude than yours. The seasoned solo diner knows something primal. He's not hiding from himself, and that unshakable ease is contagious. Women spot it instantly. The guy who's at home in his own skin, savoring his meal without fidgeting for distraction, radiates the kind of confidence no pickup line can touch. But let's go deeper than restaurants and galleries. The real alchemy happens in the quiet rituals, the Sunday mornings where you brew coffee slow and deliberate, the aimless neighborhood walks without headphones, the afternoons spent sketching in a park simply because it pleases you. These aren't just pastimes, they're rehearsals for emotional sovereignty. Seneca wrote, "Until we have begun to go without them, we fail to realize how unnecessary many things are." Translation: the more you need companionship, the needier you seem. The more you choose it from a place of abundance, the richer your connections become. Practical challenge this week: commit to one Stoic solo date, not as a tactic to appear mysterious, but as a gift to yourself. Sit through the initial itch to check your phone, the twinge of, shouldn't I be sharing this? Then watch what happens. The world starts revealing details you'd otherwise miss. The way sunlight slants through a cafe window, the snippet of jazz from a passing car, the quiet pride in the bartender's craft as he layers your cocktail. These become stories you'll tell not to impress, but because they've woven into your fabric, and when you finally do share them, they'll land differently. Not as performance, but as invitation. History's most magnetic figures, from Goethe to Miles Davis, were obsessive documenters of their solo journeys. They understood what modern men forget. Solitude isn't the absence of others, it's the discovery of yourself. And the man who's met himself deeply has infinitely more to offer when he chooses to let someone else in. That's the Stoic secret. Your ability to be alone doesn't shrink your world, it expands it. And in that expansion, you become the rare man who doesn't just attract women but captivates them. Because the best relationships aren't built on two halves searching for completion. They're built on two whole people choosing to collide. We've traveled through 10 powerful Stoic principles that don't just transform how you attract women, they reshape how you move through the world. Let's walk through them one last time, not as abstract ideas but as actionable steps in your blueprint to becoming irresistible. First, emotional mastery, the art of observing your feelings without letting them hijack your actions. This isn't about suppression, it's about clarity, the kind that lets you stay composed when others unravel. Second, authenticity, the courage to stop performing and start embodying your true self, quirks and all. Women don't fall for polished masks, they're drawn to the rare man who's unapologetically real. Third, selective vulnerability, sharing your scars, not your wounds, to build trust without neediness. Think of it as emotional judo, using your past stumbles to demonstrate strength, not fragility. Fourth, the dichotomy of control, pouring your energy only into what you can influence, your effort, your mindset, your growth, while releasing death grips on outcomes. This alone erases 90% of dating anxiety. Fifth, designing experiences, shifting from decoding her reactions to crafting moments so engaging, her enthusiasm becomes inevitable. Sixth, reframing rejection, treating every no as data, not destiny, and letting it sharpen your approach rather than shatter your confidence. Seventh, purposeful solitude, building a life so rich in meaning that your presence feels like a gift, not a demand. Eighth, Stoic listening, the practice of being fully present in conversations, not just waiting for your turn to speak. This silent skill communicates more than any clever line ever could. Ninth, body neutrality, honoring your physical form as the vessel for your mission, not obsessing over it as an ornament. And 10th, disciplined speech, choosing words that build rather than gossip, because integrity isn't just what you do, it's what you refuse to partake in. Together, these aren't pickup tactics, they're the pillars of a mindset that makes chasing attraction obsolete. When you live by them, something shifts. Women stop being puzzles to solve and become fellow travelers to appreciate. You stop seeking validation and start radiating the kind of grounded, magnetic energy that pulls the right people toward you. So here's your challenge. Don't just nod along and move on. Pick one principle, just one, to focus on this week. Maybe it's that cold shower ritual to train resilience, or perhaps it's the 3-second pause before responding in conversations. Master it, journal the results, then watch how the others start falling into place. And when you're ready to go deeper, hit subscribe. We're just getting started. Part 2 dives into advanced applications, including how Stoics handle modern dating dilemmas like ghosting, mixed signals, and keeping the spark alive long-term. But for now, tell me in the comments which principle resonates most. Where will you begin? Your journey to becoming irresistible starts with a single step.